Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your continuing commitment to give common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. Thank you for those of you who are subscribers to the show and who continue to help support this mission. If you're not subscribers already, remember, there's two ways you can do that for as little as $5 a month. On Patreon, patreon.com/undivided, or you can become a contributor on my locals community, brandikruse.locals.com. Happy Monday, happy Thanksgiving week. I told folks who read the newsletter on Sundays that we're going to do our regular show today, our regular show for subscribers on Wednesday, and then we'll take Friday off. I'm sure a lot of you will be spending time with family and friends. I'm going to be going out to the Apple Cup. We're a Cougar household. It's in Pullman this year. I heard it's going to be like 20 degrees in Eastern Washington. So I'm going to be like bundled up watching football. It'll be fun. And then, of course, we'll be back on Monday. A few things to get to today, especially as we talk about Thanksgiving, and many of us will be around a table full of food, enjoying it with good people who we love. Inflation is particularly hard for a lot of families this time of year, raising the cost of food, and it's really hitting our food banks hard. So we're going to have a local food bank on to talk about some of the challenges they're facing in this economy with the increased cost of gas and food. I thought it was a really good week, a good time to focus on those who are in the most need in our communities and who are really struggling under this economy. Also, I'm going to read some of your comments to some things I said on Friday about Nancy Pelosi and some Republicans skipping her goodbye speech as a Speaker of the House. You had some strong thoughts on that, and also some thoughts on my lack of knowledge around ranked choice voting. So I'll read some comments from you coming up at the end of the show. Also, some more Twitter news. CBS over the weekend responding to what, I don't know, temporarily halted use of its Twitter account, made this big deal of it, and then came back not 2 days later. We're going to discuss that. Donald Trump's Twitter account also restored. Has he tweeted anything yet? We'll discuss. But first, and also just in a moment, I'm going to ask you to genuinely weigh in on something I tweeted over the weekend that people think I'm an ass for tweeting. So I trust you guys to give an honest opinion. So I'm curious whether you also think I'm an ass for tweeting this. But first, I went to downtown Seattle over the weekend. Hadn't been there. I tried to, because I talk about downtown Seattle so much and just sort of the sorry state of things. I try to get down there once a month to just check things out, walk around a little bit. And I happened to be going down to Seattle anyway, so I thought, okay, let me get a little shopping in that I need to get done. Man, it's better. I will say it's getting better. I do have confidence that Bruce Harrell is trying to take the city in a better direction by focusing a little bit more on public safety, supporting law enforcement, being more aggressive with removing homeless camps that are in public right-of-ways. There's still, a lot of open air, blatant drug use happening down there. It's still not great, not what it used to be. But a little bit better. There's just a couple things that just really bum me out. And I know other areas are dealing with this as well. But, for instance, I went into one of the malls down there, Pacific Place. The thing is almost empty. I mean, what are we going to do with all these malls and there's obviously a variety of factors there. You have online shopping that's just so easy for folks. So why would you need a brick and mortar store in a lot of instances? And then downtown Seattle hasn't been in good shape for a long time. So it doesn't surprise me that you have so many of these stores in the malls that are just in the mall that is just empty. But gosh, I was going in there and I kind of walked in and walked out because I'm like, there is virtually nothing in here. And then I was on Fifth Avenue between Pike and Pine. So this is like prime downtown real estate, the core of the shopping, a big tourist corridor. I just looked up at this beautiful old building. And it's been boarded up since the 2020 riots down there. There used to be a Banana Republic kind of on the corner. And that whole block is just boarded up. And then I looked up at this beautiful old historic building, graffiti in every single window of this old building, which tells me there's probably squatters in there. I mean, how else do you get graffiti on every single window of a building? I know they've been trying to do some art installations down there. I hope that's not an art installation because it didn't look anything like art to me. It just looked trashy as hell. And I'm just like, you got this beautiful building in the heart of what's supposed to be one of America's greatest cities. And this is just one example of many buildings down there that are in this state of disrepair, that are vacant. It just bums me out. And, I would like to see businesses try to hold on, but who am I to tell a business, yeah, you stay put there with all the stuff that's going on in downtown Seattle? It's like, I don't blame businesses for not wanting to be down there right now. It just really, though, I think is that one building to me, just sitting and looking at it was just indicative of how far downtown has fallen from what it once was. But on a broader note, I went shopping around. I went to Nordstrom's and Nordstrom's Rack and down in that area. And I felt safe, safe as safe as you can feel in a major city. I didn't go down to 3rd Avenue. I went early in the afternoon. And so I think if you want to go down and support some of the businesses down there that have really been struggling, go with some friends, have a little buddy system. And I felt okay. I shouldn't have gone by myself, but I felt okay down there. So just some thoughts on what's happening downtown Seattle. Okay, am I the ass? Over the weekend, there was this shooting in Colorado, which is absolutely horrifying at Club Q, where a guy with a history, he'd been in trouble for attempted kidnapping at one point, making a bomb threat. So history of mental instability, walks into this gay nightclub and opens fire. Tragic incident, horrifying incident. You should not be targeted in this country because of who you love. And to think about the horror, and there was 2 patrons in this bar who are being called heroes for confronting the gunman in an effort to subdue him. And I think it was only 6 minutes that went by from when this guy walked in the door to when he was in the custody of police. So thankful for those brave patrons who stepped up to do something. So in response to the shooting, the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, who is gay, and so I imagine, she's seeing members of her community who are being hunted down, and I do not blame Lori Lightfoot for being upset. I want to start with that. But she tweeted out, "I'm sick of this shit. How many people need to be murdered? How many lives torn apart until it actually stops? We don't have to live like this, and we don't have to die like this." So in response to that, I'm just looking at that, and a couple people sent it to me, and I responded on Twitter, and I said, I quote tweeted it, and I said, "Who's going to remind her that she's the mayor of Chicago?" And immediately Seattle's Twitterati, which is 20 people on the far left in Seattle who just hate me, immediately "Oh, you need to take this down. You're a horrible human being." Somebody told me they wanted me to dive headfirst off the Space Needle. Yeah, a lot of angry people. But here's my point. And again, you tell me if I'm the ass in this. Maybe I should have given it a couple days and not turned this. I think there's a feeling that it's okay, people died in Colorado, and you have to take a shot at Lori Lightfoot. But my point is, here you have this mayor in a city that has hundreds of people shot and killed every single year, including over this past weekend in Chicago. I've never seen Lori Lightfoot that furious over the lives being lost in her own city, the city she is elected to be in charge of, people dying on her watch. And so I see her saying, "I'm sick of this shit. How many people need to be murdered?" about this, real tragedy in Colorado. But I think, where's that level of anger and rage for what's happening on the streets of your city? I think there's this, and I want to look at the, 5 killed in Colorado and about 20 or so injured. And 5 lives is 5 lives too many. But I was looking at, more than 700 people killed in Chicago every year, something like that. That's insane. And there's just this pattern, I think, on the left of certain lives mattering more than others. as an example, when there was this whole push in 2020 and 2021 to pass police reforms to try to limit or stop deaths at the hands of police, fatal police shootings. And, the representative who pushed that, who I had on the show, we had a nice long conversation that was very respectful, Representative Jesse Johnson of Federal Way. Well, he made it his point. He led these police reform efforts in Olympia in 2021. Well, that year, the community he represents, Federal Way, had a record homicide rate. And a lot of the people who died were young Black men. Yet I didn't see the same anger and focus from Jesse Johnson to stop the young Black men shooting each other on the streets of his city as I did his efforts in Olympia to stop the very rare instances when police shoot and kill someone who's unarmed, a young Black man who's unarmed. And I asked Jesse about that when he was on the show, but it's like, why aren't your efforts equal across the board to say, hey, we're trying to save the lives of young Black men? So to me, whether they're shot at the hand and killed at the hands of police or shot and killed at the hands of other gang members, that's a life lost. That is a life full of potential lost. And now look, I'm of the belief that police need to be held accountable, perhaps more than anyone else in government, because they have a badge and a gun. They have the legal authority to take someone's life. And whenever you have that, I mean, absolutely, you need oversight of that. And I understand that, and that's the role that Jesse Johnson was playing in the state legislature to try to give oversight to police officers. 100% understand that. But it's just like there's ignoring the elephant in the room, which is the vast majority of young Black men who are being shot and killed. It's happening with gang violence. It's happening with violence on our streets. So if you really want to save young men's lives, like, you have to show me that you care about their lives, no matter who takes that life. And so that was my feeling with Lori Lightfoot. It's like, okay, I wasn't trying to say in my tweet that we shouldn't care about what happened in Colorado Springs. Of course we should. It's horrifying. It's a tragedy. But at the same time, where is this level of anger for what's happening on the streets of her city? And if she really cares about quote unquote, gun violence, then she just needs to look out the window of her office at City Hall in Chicago and be laser focused on trying to save the hundreds of lives every year taken by guns, people with guns, on the streets of her city. So that was my point in saying, who's going to remind her that she's the mayor of Chicago? But you tell me, am I the ass for what I tweeted in response to Lori Lightfoot? I'll take your criticism. If you think I'm the ass, maybe the timing wasn't great, et cetera, but I really just don't believe that as a politician, as someone in a position of leadership, that you should be able to pick and choose what kind of deaths by gunfire outrage you more. Elon Musk's Twitter has reinstated Donald Trump's account. Of course, he got that lifetime ban after the January 6th Capitol attack. But it's just reinstated in its old form. And it's really actually kind of interesting because the former president has not used it yet. And he's got his Truth Social thing. So he's kind of been like, I'm going to be on Truth Social. There's a financial interest in that for him. But I have to imagine it's very hard for the former president, who had very tweety trigger fingers, to stay off of Twitter. But so far he has, since his reinstatement. And actually, it's really interesting to look at the account now, because the very last things that were on here were his tweets about the Capitol attack. For instance, he's only, like, the last 4 tweets. One of them was, I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful, no violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. That was sent out January 6th, 2021 at 12:13 p.m. as all of that was unfolding. And then he had a clip of him giving some remarks, urging people to stay peaceful. And then he had a tweet January 8th, the 75 million great American patriots who voted for me, America first, and make America great again will have a giant voice long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form. And then the very final tweet that former President Donald Trump sent out on Twitter before his account was disabled was January 8th. He said, to all those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th. There's a lot of people simply losing it over Donald Trump being reinstated on Twitter. But to me, he never really left Twitter anyway. Every time Donald Trump tweets something on Truth Social, or I don't know what you call it, obviously it's not called tweeting, every time he posts something on Truth Social, all the blue checks screenshot it and then post it to Twitter. Oh, here's what Donald Trump just said on Truth Social. So it's like, we're seeing what he says anyway. I don't really know how much of a difference it was, because it's not as if he's been completely cut off from civilization. But this is just one of the reasons that a lot of people think Twitter is just going in the garbage under Elon Musk. There was this really interesting narrative over the weekend. So there were all these hashtags trending on Twitter over the weekend, and it was like hashtag RIP Twitter, things like that. And people were predicting the death of Twitter because there were some reports that there's just this absolute mass exodus of Twitter employees who, had a choice, like either take the Twitter buyout or stay, and a bunch of them took the buyout. Like, so much so that I think there was this feeling that Twitter wouldn't be able to really operate without all of these employees, which I just thought was weird. I think it was just this echo chamber of Twitter and people saying, oh, it's RIP Twitter. Well, apparently CBS News takes the echo chamber very, very seriously, because CBS News announced on the air during the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, there was a report about all this turmoil within Twitter. And CBS's reporter made an announcement on the CBS Evening News during their report.
In light of the uncertainty around Twitter and out of an abundance of caution, CBS News is pausing its activity on the social media site as it continues to monitor the platform, Major.
Jonathan Vigliotti, thank you.
Okay, continues to monitor the platform. So here you have one of the biggest news organizations in the world just saying, oh, we're going to pause use of Twitter, which is a way that many, many people in this country and across the planet get news. Because they're worried, there's uncertainty, worried about the, hackers or something, like if there's not enough Twitter employees to stop them, like their account might be in jeopardy. And to me, like, it's not like they took their account down. So even though they paused tweeting, it's not as if somebody couldn't mess with their account while they weren't tweeting anyway. And you're telling me if there had been some massive, serious news event over the weekend, that CBS News wouldn't have immediately been back on Twitter and like, breaking news, breaking news. It's just ridiculous to me. And then to make it even more ridiculous, just a couple days later, CBS News PR tweeted, after pausing for much of the weekend to assess the security concerns, CBS News and stations are resuming its activity on Twitter as we continue to monitor the situation. Continue to monitor the situation as if it's like a terror attack or like a terror threat. It's so bizarre to me. And to assess the security concerns. And I responded to CBS News PR and I said, don't worry, hackers couldn't possibly tweet anything worse from your account than you just tweeted. Because I think this is CBS, again, one of the largest media organizations in the world, cutting off a main source of information for people because there were some hashtags trending RIP Twitter. And it's almost like they wanted so badly for Twitter to fail and they wanted to like get out in front of it. And when they realized, of course, Twitter didn't fail, they're like, oh, we're back now. We're back with CBS and we're tweeting again. Yeah, monitoring the situation. It's very weird language. So we'll see what happens. I mean, Twitter could fail. I don't know. There have been a lot of employees leaving Twitter. Elon Musk is in it for profit. If for some reason it becomes unprofitable, sure, it could fail. I guess I'm not like on pins and needles waiting to see what the future of Twitter is. I think it's been a useful tool. I think it is a useful tool. I think in its absence, other useful tools will spring up. And frankly, as I detailed just a segment ago, Twitter is a cesspool of hate and ignorance. And it has been for years and years and years. And that's not changed under Elon Musk. So I guess I'm just not going to be upset if Twitter fails, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm going to delete my account. I'm going to stop. No, I'm just going to use it until if the day comes where it's not available anymore, and then I'll go find something else to do. It's just this, and it's all about Elon. It has nothing to do, this freak out over what's actually happening, like with the platform of Twitter. It all has to do with this freak out over Elon Musk and them not liking him as a person. So again, just fascinating weekend for Twitter, and to watch not just random people on Twitter freak out, but a mainstream media organization freak out. The following segment is brought to you in partnership with Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. This time of year in particular, we're thinking a lot about gratitude, how grateful we are for our loved ones, how grateful we might be for a steady job or income. And it's also time for us to really think and reflect on people who are struggling, people who aren't feeling that level of gratitude in their lives right now. And especially the week of Thanksgiving. And I was reminded of gratitude and the true need out there as people are just crushed under the weight of inflation and gas prices. I was reminded of it a couple times this weekend. I was at Fred Meyer getting some stuff for our own Thanksgiving meal at home, and Eastside Fire and Rescue was having a food drive at Fred Meyer. And so, I picked up some peanut butter and cereal and stuff for the food drive. But then when I got home, I checked the mail, and in the mailbox was this just kind of flyer from Northwest Harvest, which runs food banks across the state. And there was this little note from Thomas Reynolds, a message from, he's the chief executive officer. And the title of it was "All Ideas Are on the Table." And I just want to read part of it for you. He wrote, "Right now in Washington, the number of people who are not sure where their meals will come from is skyrocketing. At the same time, Northwest Harvest and most of the food banks, food pantries, and meal programs we partner with have significantly depleted food stocks to offer to people who are seeking food. The corresponding availability crunch for people who experience food insecurity is alarming to me. Inflation is crushing household budgets. Food in our region costs as much as 25% more than last year. As an organization that exists to provide quality, in-demand foods to people who do not have enough resources to make their budget stretch until their next paycheck, I'm seeing the resources at our distribution centers shrinking, while at the same time, the need for households to stretch is expanding. I'm finding this to be true from Bellingham to Yakima to Spokane to South King County to neighborhoods in Seattle and on the east side." He went on to write, "I don't have the option to lament the situation and wait and see if things get better." He went on to say, "For me, I am worrying about fulfilling the heart of our organization's mission that pales in comparison to the worry families are experiencing when money is exhausted and risk of hunger weighs heavily." And that's hard to hear. But look, we know that the people who are really suffering under the pressure of inflation are those people who are kind of right on the line, who, when food costs 25% more in some instances, that's the difference between them being able to afford it or not afford it. And then if they go to a food bank for resources and those food banks are depleted, I mean, where do they turn? And as, again, Thomas Reynolds with Northwest Harvest said, this is not just happening in the Seattle area, it's happening across the state, and it's not just happening to their food banks. I spoke with the executive director of the South King County Food Coalition to talk about what they're facing. Barb, welcome to Undivided. Introduce yourself.
I'm Barb Houston-Shimizu, and I work with the Des Moines Area Food Bank as the Associate Director here. And I'm also the Executive Director for the South King County Food Coalition, which is 12 food banks serving all of South King County, kind of working together.
What is the need level right now that you're seeing out there in your communities?
It isn't the crisis that I think we'll see come recession, but it is definitely growing. And the need, I would say, is deepening.
Inflation, we've been talking about it for months now, the cost of gasoline, and as those dollars sort of add up for folks, how is that impacting people in the community who were maybe already on the cusp already of having trouble putting food on their table?
Well, people are really feeling the pinch, and this has been it's kind of like the third wave actually. Pre-COVID, we saw a lot of housing costs go up as we had businesses like Amazon purchasing large spots downtown and other investors using up that space, were driving people south, and that put a lot of pressure on housing costs down here in South King County. So people were already feeling that before COVID. And then during COVID, of course, some people lost their work. A lot of businesses, especially here around the airport, we have a lot of restaurants and hotels and service industry businesses that just shut down. And then supply chain issues that really raised costs of almost everything. And then after that, now post-COVID, we're seeing this rise, for example, in gasoline and the inflation that's driving because with the war in Ukraine. Gasoline is a huge factor in food costs and just transportation costs in general. So it's a challenge for people because those are some of the most, important basic needs in their life: transportation and food.
You mentioned kind of the looming idea of a recession, and I know that folks who know about those kind of things are urging folks to sort of pinch pennies where they can. We already saw Amazon and some other tech companies laying off people, which is an indicator of maybe what's to come. So how do you even, when you're already in a state of, increased need, how do you even start to prepare for the possibility that need could get much, much greater?
Well, that's just kind of the natural evolution of our business. We just, whoever comes to the door, we serve with whatever we have. And we're seeing especially a lot of seniors or disabled people, people who have not been able to participate in this full employment economy that we've had. Because even though we're talking about inflation, jobs have really been there, right? We're very low unemployment right now. So, of course, people are feeling the pinch as their heating costs go up in the winter. Their transportation costs, even just getting to work, food costs have gone up. So they're feeling that pinch, but it's nothing like when you lose a job. And seniors are in the same boat because they don't get to enjoy full employment. For them, they don't have employment. And so what we like to say, oh, they're on a fixed income, but really their income is not fixed when their rent is going up, their food costs are going up, but their income is not going up. So it's a real challenge for them. And next up, definitely we are looking at recession. And then it's just a matter of how deep that might be.
Yeah, fixed income, but not a fixed cost of living. And that's really challenging for retirees and folks who are out of the workforce, as you said. Kind of in the plan ahead stage, do you guys have, and maybe this is naive and I don't know how food banks work, but do you keep like emergency reserves where it's like things have gotten bad, we're not getting enough donations in, and we can tap into emergency reserves?
Absolutely, we do. So, two things on that. Yes, we keep reserves. I think most healthy nonprofits maintain, several months worth of operating expenses just in case of a rainy day, and so that's normal for many of us, and we have that in hand. But our business is not really dependent on our funding, right? Our business model in the past has been dependent upon donations. So whether that's financial donations from individuals to help pay our staff or even to do a little bit of food purchasing, but most of our food has come through the donation stream. And so even having reserves doesn't mean that, oh, we're going to have enough to go out and buy a bunch of food. That's very expensive and not generally how this business has worked in the past.
On kind of donations, you told me something on the phone earlier that was interesting to me, which is, as you pointed out, jobs have been pretty good. The job market has been pretty stable. And you were telling me that even though there's some other challenges in the economy with inflation and gas prices, when the job market is pretty stable, people aren't thinking like, oh, hey, I should go donate to a food bank.
Yep, that's very much true. It's kind of interesting. Food banks tend to lag the market or the economy by about 3 years. So um, the great thing about our work is that when things do get bad, people come to help in droves. People really pull out, open up their wallets and they sacrifice to share with their neighbors in need. So that was the second piece of a recession or of planning ahead. It's like, I know that my community is going to jump to the fore and they're going to be there for everybody in need when we have that recession. Sometimes our worst time is after, right? And right now is the most difficult time for us because it's high employment. People think, oh, everybody's doing fine. There is no need. And that's when food banks tend to struggle the most. So I know that right now we are really struggling because it's been a good economy and people haven't had to think about us. But now as we move into recession, it will be really much needed assistance.
You also mentioned two kind of cushions that you guys have lost recently, one related to trade and one related to COVID. Can you explain that?
Sure. Prior to COVID, we had some, during the previous presidential administrations, we were having some conflict with China in terms of our trade agreements and putting tariffs on them. And that was a challenge for our farmers because China is a big market, of course, also. So the to offset that, the federal government put billions of dollars into supporting our local farmers. And then that food turned around and came through our emergency food systems. So that was meant to help both the farmers and it helped us as well. But those trade mitigation products have now sunsetted. Those support programs for the farmers have sunsetted, and so that food is no longer coming through our organizations. And then we also have, during COVID, of course, as everybody knows, the government spent billions of dollars to make sure that there was food flowing out into the communities as jobs shut down, businesses shut down, and food might not have been as available. Imagine what would have happened if we didn't have that kind of support in our communities. So yes, we had tons and tons of food flowing through our systems that we were then pushing out into the communities to make sure that people had it no matter what was happening with their jobs during COVID. And again, that kind of extra support has now sunsetted, and we're kind of having to go back to the norm.
Does normal even exist anymore?
Yeah, you see me laughing. Back to the norm. Which is still fairly high. And part of that is also that with COVID, we were able to adopt some new programs. We did lots of innovation in a very short period of time, trying to reach people in new ways. So, for example, in addition to our regular food bank that people can come in and shop for their food, kind of in a grocery style, we are also started up a DoorDash delivery program in collaboration, obviously, with DoorDash and United Way. And so we're reaching hundreds of families every week through delivery. But that is on top of our traditional program. And so the question of whether or not we can keep that going is a whole nother question when it gets down to recession and things tighten up, because that kind of program is very expensive. When we're having to purchase food to send out, the donation stream will not support our regular food bank plus that kind of DoorDash delivery, community delivery program. So the question of whether or not we can keep that going is a whole nother question. But that is a program that's reaching out to people in the community who in the past have not been able to get to us. There are many people that don't have transportation, or they work or something like that. It's hard for everybody to access the food bank. Just because we're here doesn't mean that everybody can get to us. In other words, we're reaching more need than we were able to before, and whether we can continue that is a question.
On this show, we try to look for things people can agree on. I would hope everyone can agree that we want to make sure that everyone has food on their table and in their refrigerators. So I guess the question is, what can be done? What do you need from the folks who are watching?
Well, we certainly, of course, we can use funding. One of the other impacts of COVID has been that there's been pressure on employment wages, right? When an Amazon here in Seattle is their business was booming as the delivery business grew in COVID. Home delivery, for example, grew tremendously. So people could go out and get jobs driving or delivering for $18 or more per hour plus a bonus. So all of a sudden, our job, which had been well above minimum wage, is not very competitive. And so definitely one of our needs is to try to increase wages for our employees, so they're going to be earning a living wage and not qualifying for the food bank that they're working in. And so that's one thing. Definitely, we also want to be able to continue purchasing. During COVID, we got some special funding in order to purchase culturally appropriate foods, so we could get fresh produce, fresh, good foods that were really meaningful for families, and at the same time supporting local farmers in doing that. So that's a program that the funding has ended. We hit a big funding cliff, and we could really use funds to continue to support local food systems and also provide people with really whole, fresh, healthy food. And then just food donations, kind of getting back to that, where the food donations are a lot less than they used to be in terms of just our dry and canned goods. So if people can think about starting to get back in the gear with that. Of course, with COVID, everything kind of shut down and everybody stayed home, and they weren't out in some of the social settings, the church or the civic organizations that that have previously driven those kind of donations. They weren't out doing those things, and if they can kind of move back into that donating space, that would be really helpful.
And top items that you guys like to get in at the food pantries and banks?
The food bank, well, and it kind of depends on some of the programs that food banks are doing, but definitely for us here at Des Moines, we're definitely looking for some protein products, especially for our seniors, some extra protein like, I don't know, peanut butter or canned meats like chicken or tuna. We also sometimes have we have a special backpack program for kids where we're providing weekend backpacks through our local schools. So we can definitely use like oatmeal or little applesauce cups or juice cups or things that would be great for children.
Okay, Barb. Well, we appreciate the work that you and your entire crew are doing, and we'll see what we can do to get some folks moving at the grocery store and bringing stuff to their area food banks.
That would certainly be very much appreciated and much needed. Thank you very much.
The preceding segment was brought to you in partnership with Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. All right, we want to end the show with some comments from you. There were a few segments I did that some of you didn't like very much. On Friday's show, I talked about Nancy Pelosi giving remarks about how she's never going to be in House leadership again and sort of passing the baton to the next generation. And a point I made was, look, there's a lot of Republicans, including Kevin McCarthy, who did not go to this speech. And I thought, can't you just show up and show a little grace and civility for this woman who has had a historic career in Congress? And several of you pointed out that former Speaker Pelosi has not been the height of civility in the chamber herself. And several of you pointed out when she tore up her copy of the State of the Union address, Trump's State of the Union address in 2020, standing directly behind him and ripping it up. And look, I understand. I did a very blistering commentary of Nancy Pelosi acting like a straight up child, ripping up her copy of the address. And again, it comes back to this issue of moral consistency. I thought Nancy Pelosi acted like a child, and now I think Republicans who skipped her speech over politics are acting like children. And I guess and I've said this many times, I think that this is how the flush down the toilet of discourse continues and continues and continues. This is how we race to the bottom, is we use the other party's behavior to excuse our own bad behavior. Then they use our bad behavior to excuse their bad behavior. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until we've hit rock bottom. And now we're both just rolling in the mud. And at some point, some party has to step up and be like, look, we're going to be above all this. We're going to work for the people of the country who are going through a lot of serious things right now. So that's what I want. But just a couple of the comments, TJ said, Speaker Pelosi tore up her copy of the 2020 State of the Union address directly behind then President Trump. In addition to her relentless attacks toward his administration, she does not have my respect. Let's see. Weiss Castle, I lost any and all respect for Pelosi when she tore up President Trump's State of the Union speech. What a petty and childish act. Separate person's accomplishments from politics. Yeah, and look, and what I was trying to say is I think we need to try to separate the person from the politics. And I do think Nancy Pelosi has had a historic career. Have there been moments where she's been, as Weiss Castle said, petty and childish? Absolutely. But I just don't believe in this. If they did it, we can do it too. If they did it, we can do worse and get away with it. I just think that's not productive. That's not gonna solve anything, and it's just gonna continue this race to the bottom. Let's see, another story that I had a lot of comments on. I was saying I had Julie Anderson on the show, the former Secretary of State candidate, and I was talking about how I don't really understand ranked choice voting. And a few of you said, one of you said, I can't find the comment right now. Where did it go? That basically I was acting like a Valley girl, I'm blonde, I don't understand ranked choice voting, and how it was kind of a turnoff. I'm just a little self-deprecating. That's just in my personality. And I had some comments saying, well, if you just spent a little bit of time looking into it, you'd understand it. And I get that. And so I read the comments, totally understand. I never want to come off as a ditzy blonde. I'm always joking when I talk about, I'm blonde, I'm having a blonde moment. I think I'm intelligent. So we're going to have someone on the show next week to do an in-depth look at an explanation of ranked choice voting, the pros and the cons, and we'll talk about it in a very in-depth way. And I won't mention my hair color once, okay? One more story you guys had a lot of comments on, and that was about this lawsuit that a white man filed, a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Seattle. Claims he was subject to a hostile work environment, years of racial discrimination because he's white, and it had to do with the city's efforts at equity and inclusion, and it was almost like it went too far. Wise said, I feel terrible for the racism he received, but I'm glad he and his lawyer are taking this to court. And I'm glad to hear her say racism is racism, and there is no such thing as reverse racism. She is right. And it's ridiculous to me that the color of someone's skin determines if you are an oppressor or the oppressed. Yes, please follow up with this case. We absolutely will. And I agree. I use the term reverse racism, which is traditionally meant to say, racism against white people. And what this man's attorney said is, I don't believe in that phrase. I don't think you should use that phrase because it doesn't matter if you're white, if you're black, if you're Hispanic, if you're Asian. If someone is discriminating against you based on the color of your skin, then that's racism, plain and simple. And so I'm going to change my practice of using the phrase reverse racism because she changed my mind on that. And I understood her point very well. Malika said, I hope this lawsuit hits the mainstream media in Seattle. This is astonishing how blatant the discrimination is. I agree. If everything they're saying happened, and they've said they have some supporting documents, I don't see how this is not a successful lawsuit. Again, and the reason I used reverse racism in asking her a question is I said, is it harder to convince like a jury if that's what this comes down to, especially if you're in like a liberal area like Seattle or a liberal judge? That of discrimination against a white person? Will they just sort of scoff at that? And I think that's a real question, right? Is he going to get the same treatment that a former black employee would if they were coming forward with the same kind of evidence and claiming discrimination? So we will absolutely be following this case, but I had a lot of comments from you guys on that particular interview as well. All right, that is it for today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your continuing commitment to give common sense a comeback. If you're able to, if you're in an okay place financially, go donate to one of your local food banks this week or over the weekend. If you're lucky enough to have food on your table for Thanksgiving, just remember there's so many people who truly do not. And if you could pick up a few extra jars of peanut butter or a few other non-perishables and bring to your local food bank and do your part to help them deal with what really is a crisis situation for them and for so many families in our community, I think this is a really good opportunity to do that and to do something that not only will make other people feel good, but it'll make yourself feel good as well. All right, I will see all of you subscribers on our Wednesday show.